The Alpha King's pup wouldn't stop crying until the Wolfless Omega did the unthinkable. He sounds like he's tearing himself apart. The whisper was jagged, barely audible over the harrowing screams echoing from the nursery tower. "He is tearing us apart," a nursemaid replied, clutching a basin with trembling hands. 3 days of this. The Alpha King hasn't slept. If the heir dies, the pack breaks. A raw, guttural wail pierced the stone walls, followed by the crash of shattered glass. The maid's eyes widened in terror. "Edwin won't let us mourn the boy, Martha. If his son dies, the king will let us die with him." The wail was a living thing, a relentless frequency that scraped against the ancient stones of Obsidian Hall until the very air felt brittle. It wasn't merely a cry, it was a siren of distress that curdled the blood of every wolf within a 10-mile radius. Down in the tunnels, servants covered their ears, terrified of the omen it represented. But for King Edwin Primeworth, the sound was far worse. It was a blade of pure helplessness, twisting slowly in his chest, severing the composure he had spent a lifetime perfecting. Edwin stood by the nursery window, his knuckles white as he gripped the stone sill. The glass reflected a man who looked less like a monarch and more like a ruin. His dark hair was matted with sweat, his shirt unbuttoned to reveal a chest that heaved with suppressed rage and terrifying helplessness. He was the strongest Alpha in 3 centuries, a war-bringer, a territory claimer. He could crush a boulder with his jaw. He could command an army with a growl, but he could not make his son stop crying. "My Liege!" Cordelia Frostwell's voice was like crushed velvet, smooth but stifling. The high healer stood near the crib, her hands glowing with a soft, azure light. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The child's aura is chaotic. It repels the calming spells. It is as if his wolf is fighting his human form. "He is 3 weeks old, Cordelia," Edwin snarled, not turning around. "He does not have a wolf yet. He is a baby." "He is your son," Cordelia countered, her tone bordering on insolent, protected only by her high status. "His power is immense. It is leaking out, hurting him. We need to sedate him again." "No more sedatives," Edwin roared, spinning around. The sudden movement sent a wave of dominance rolling through the room, forcing the 2 nursemaids in the corner to drop to their knees, whimpering. Even Cordelia flinched, her magic flickering out. "You drug him. He sleeps for an hour, and he wakes up screaming louder. He is starving, Cordelia. He rejects the wet nurse. He rejects the bottle. He is fading." The baby, a tiny bundle wrapped in silks of royal purple, writhed in the crib. The infant's face was a mask of red, blotchy misery. His mouth was open in a silent scream before the breath caught and the wail erupted again, a sound of pure, unadulterated suffering. Edwin walked to the crib, his movements predatory, yet hesitant. He looked down at the last thing his mate, the late queen, had left him before the fever took her. The boy, Silas, named for a grandfather, but currently called nothing but the Sorrow by the staff, looked fragile. "Pick him up," Edwin commanded. "Sire, his temperature is spiking," Cordelia warned. "Handling him aggravates the sensory overload. The skin-to-skin contact with an alpha of your magnitude. It might be too much stimulation." Edwin slammed his fist against the wall, cracking the stone. "Then find me someone with less magnitude. Find me someone he will not reject." Down in the scullery, 5 floors below the shouting and the magic, Lavinia Brightfall dipped her raw red hands into scalding water. She scrubbed the grease from a copper pan, her movements rhythmic, mechanical. She was invisible. In a world governed by scent, hierarchy, and the primal power of the wolf, Lavinia was a ghost. She was a wolfless, an omega born without the spirit of the beast. To the pack, she was a genetic dead end, a mistake allowed to live only to serve. She had no scent signature, no growl, no ability to shift. She was just human in a world of monsters. But she had ears, and for 3 days the crying had filtered down through the ventilation shafts, bypassing the heavy oak doors, winding its way to the kitchens. To the wolves, the cry was an annoyance, a threat to the hierarchy. To Lavinia, it sounded different. She didn't hear power leaking. She didn't hear a curse. She heard a stomach twisting in knots. She heard terror. She heard a baby who was being overwhelmed by the crushing weight of the magic surrounding him. "Stupid mutts," she whispered to the soapy water, scrubbing harder. "Stop throwing magic at a colic." Talking to the pans again. Brightfall? Lavinia didn't flinch as Penelope Stormhill sashayed into the kitchen. Penelope was a beta, aiming to be an alpha's mate, perhaps even Edwin's if the heir died, and he needed a new broodmare. She was beautiful, sharp-edged, and cruel. "Just working, Lady Penelope," Lavinia said, keeping her eyes down. "Well, work faster. The high healer needs hot compresses, boiling, and fresh linen. The prince has vomited again." Penelope wrinkled her nose, though Lavinia knew she smelled of nothing but soap and water. "God, it's depressing down here. It smells like emptiness." Lavinia dried her hands on her rough apron. "I'll take them up." "You?" Penelope laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "A Wolfless in the royal wing? You'll be gutted by the guards before you reach the landing. The other maids are hiding in the pantry because the king's pheromones are making them submit involuntarily," Lavinia said flatly. "I don't feel pheromones. I can walk through it." Penelope paused. She looked at Lavinia with a mixture of disgust and calculation. It was true. The Alpha King's distress was broadcasting a dominance signal, so strong it was paralyzing the lower-ranked wolves. Only a Wolfless would be immune. "Fine," Penelope sneered. "Take the basket. If he kills you for entering, it saves me the trouble of firing you next week." Lavinia took the heavy basket of linens and steaming water. She didn't hurry. She moved with the quiet, practiced stillness of someone who has spent 24 years trying not to be seen. As she climbed the spiral stairs of the servants' passage, the air grew heavy. It felt thick, electrified, buzzing with the static of angry wolves, but to Lavinia it just felt like a headache. She pushed the heavy oak door to the nursery corridor open. The screaming was deafening here. It wasn't just a cry, it was a plea. Lavinia walked past 2 guards who were leaning against the wall, clutching their heads, their eyes squeezed shut against the king's projecting rage. They didn't even stop her. They couldn't. She reached the nursery door. It was ajar. Inside, the room was a storm of blue light and shouting. Cordelia was chanting. Edwin was pacing, a caged tiger. The baby was alone in the crib, isolated in a bubble of protective spells that rippled like oil on water. Lavinia stepped inside. She didn't announce herself. She didn't bow. She just walked toward the crib. Edwin stopped pacing. He turned, his eyes flashing gold, his lips pulled back to reveal elongated canines. He let out a low, warning growl that vibrated in Lavinia's sternum. "Who?" he rumbled, his voice layered with the beast. "Are you?" Lavinia didn't look at him. She looked at the baby. "I'm the laundry maid," she said, her voice shockingly normal in the room of magical reverberations. "And you're all making it worse." The silence that followed her statement was more profound than the screaming. Even the baby seemed to hitch a breath, startled by the sudden drop in the room's magical pressure as Cordelia stopped her chanting in sheer shock. "Excuse me." Cordelia's voice went up an octave. "You dare! Get out!" Edwin said. It wasn't a shout. It was a death sentence. He stepped toward Lavinia, his shadow falling over her like a collapsing tower. "Get out before I tear your throat out!" Lavinia's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her feet remained rooted. This was the suicidal bravery of the exhausted. "He's cold," she said, gesturing to the child. "He is burning up," Cordelia snapped, stepping forward, her silk robes rustling. "His temperature is lethal." "He's cold," Lavinia repeated, finally lifting her eyes to meet the Alpha King's gaze. Edwin froze. He expected submission. He expected the girl to drop to her neck, baring her throat, whining for mercy. But Lavinia stood there, in her stained grey dress and rough apron, looking at him with brown eyes that held no wolf. No challenge, but no surrender. "You have no scent," Edwin realized, sniffing the air. "You are wolfless." "Yes," Lavinia said. "Which means I'm the only person in this room not shouting psychically at your son." The baby screamed again, a high-pitched shriek of misery. He kicked his legs, knocking the silk blanket away. "He's reacting to the magic," Lavinia explained, her voice trembling slightly now as the king loomed closer. "He's an alpha heir, right? Born with sensitive senses? You're blasting him with healing spells, dominance auras, and panic. It's too loud. For him, it's too loud." Edwin looked from the girl to his son. The logic was simple, almost insulting, but it pierced through his panic. "And what would a broken thing like you know of alpha heirs?" Edwin asked, cruel, testing. "I know that when the dogs in the kennel are overwhelmed, you don't shout at them," Lavinia said softly. "You put them in the dark. You hold them." "If you touch him and he dies," Edwin whispered, leaning down so his face was inches from hers, "I will hunt you across the afterlife." "If you don't let me touch him, he's going to die anyway," Lavinia whispered back. It was the unthinkable defiance. No one spoke to the king this way. Edwin stared at her for a heartbeat. 2, 3. Then he took a step back. He didn't nod, he just stopped blocking the crib. Cordelia gasped. "Sire, she is unclean, she is—" "Silence!" Edwin roared, without looking at the healer. Lavinia moved. She didn't hesitate. She reached into the crib. The magical barrier Cordelia had erected sizzled against her skin, stinging. But Lavinia pushed her hands through it. She was wolfless. Magic had a hard time gripping her. She broke the seal. She scooped the baby up. He was hot, agonizingly hot, but his skin was clammy. He was stiff, his back arched in pain. Lavinia didn't cradle him in the traditional way. She sat down on the expensive velvet nursing chair, unbuttoned the top of her rough woolen dress to expose the skin of her collarbone, and placed the baby against her. Skin to skin. "What are you doing?" Cordelia hissed. "Shh," Lavinia commanded. She pulled her apron up over the baby's back, creating a dark, warm cocoon, blocking out the light of the room. The baby struggled for a second, letting out a jagged cry. Lavinia didn't rock him frantically. She sat perfectly still. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs, and exhaled slowly, forcing her own heart rate to slow down. She was a void. She had no wolf spirit clamoring for attention. She had no magic humming in her veins. She was cool, quiet silence. She began to hum. Not a pack song, not the guttural rhythmic chanting of the wolves. She hummed a melody her human mother had taught her before she passed, a simple folk tune about a river that flowed nowhere. The room held its breath. Edwin watched, his body coiled tight as a spring. He watched the dirty, grey-clad Omega, holding the future of the kingdom against her chest. He watched the way her hand, rough and red from scrubbing floors, encompassed the back of the prince's head, shielding his ear from the noise of the castle. The screaming stopped. It didn't taper off, it cut out. The baby let out a shuddering gasp, then another. He buried his face into the crook of Lavinia's neck. The frantic kicking ceased. His tiny fists, which had been clenched for days, slowly uncurled, gripping the fabric of her dress. "Impossible," Cordelia whispered. Lavinia kept humming, a low vibration in her throat. She could feel the heat radiating off the baby. But as the minutes ticked by, the fever seemed to break, sweat cooling on his skin. He wasn't sick with a virus. He was sick with overstimulation. He needed an anchor, and everyone else in the castle was a storm. She was the ground. Edwin moved closer. He moved silently now, the predator approaching a curiosity. He stopped 2 feet away. He could smell the change. The scent of distress, acrid and metallic, was fading from the boy, replaced by the scent of milk and nothing. The clean, empty scent of the girl. Lavinia looked up. Her eyes were tired. "He's asleep." Edwin looked at his son. For the first time in 3 weeks, Silas looked peaceful. His breath was deep and rhythmic. "You," Edwin said, his voice unrecognizable. It was hoarse, stripped of the growl. "Lavinia," she supplied, seeing as he likely didn't know her name. "Lavinia," he tested the word. "Don't move." "I have floors to scrub, sire." "Not anymore," Edwin said. He looked at Cordelia. "Leave us." "Sire, I must monitor." "Get out." Cordelia flushed crimson, gathered her robes, and fled the room, the heavy doors booming shut behind her. Now, it was just the king, the Wolfless, and the sleeping prince. Edwin knelt. It was a shocking breach of protocol for an Alpha to kneel before an Omega, let alone a Wolfless, but he knelt so he could be eye level with his son. He reached out a large, scarred hand and brushed the baby's cheek with the back of a finger. Silas didn't stir. Edwin looked at Lavinia. Up close, he saw the smudges of fatigue under her eyes, the fraying collar of her dress, the way her pulse fluttered in her throat. She was terrified of him. "You stopped the noise," he said, sounding bewildered. "I just provided the quiet," she corrected. "He likes you." Edwin sounded jealous. "He hates me. Every time I hold him, he screams." "You are very loud, Your Majesty," Lavinia said bravely. "Your power, it hums. Even I can feel it, and I'm dull to it. To him, it must feel like standing next to a bonfire." Edwin stared at his hands. "I am hurting him?" "You are loving him too hard," Lavinia said. "He needs space. He needs—" "The void," Edwin finished. He looked at her intensely. "He needs the Wolfless." The baby shifted, letting out a tiny whimper. Lavinia instinctively rubbed his back, a slow, circular motion. The whimper died instantly. Edwin stood up. The spell of vulnerability broke, replaced by the decisiveness of a king. "You will stay here." Lavinia blinked. "Here, in the nursery. In the castle, in this room. You will not return to the scullery." "Sire, I can't. The staff. Lady Penelope. I have duties." "Your duty is him," Edwin pointed to the sleeping child. "You are the royal pacifier now, or the royal pillow. I don't care what we call it. But if you put him down and he starts screaming again, I will have you shackled to this chair." It was a threat, but it lacked the heat of his earlier rage. It was the threat of a desperate father. "I need clothes," Lavinia said, her voice small. "And I need to eat. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning." Edwin frowned, as if the concept of her starvation was a personal failing of his logistics officer. He walked to the door and threw it open. "Guard!" he bellowed. A terrified guard appeared. "Yes, Alpha. Bring food, meat, bread, fruit. Enough for 2. And bring the seamstress. And tell Cordelia that if she tries to enter this room with her crystals again, I will feed them to her." He slammed the door and turned back to Lavinia. For a second, the corner of his mouth twitched. "Welcome to the pack, Wolfless." News traveled through Obsidian Hall faster than fire in dry grass. The Wolfless calmed the air. The scrubber girl is in the royal wing. The king knelt. By the next morning, Lavinia Brightfall had gone from invisible to the most scrutinized object in the kingdom. She sat on the edge of the grand four-poster bed in the nursery, a bed she was apparently supposed to sleep in, though she had slept in the chair, fearing she would dirty the silk sheets. Silas was awake now, lying on a changing table, gurgling happily as Lavinia wiped his face with a warm cloth. The door opened, and Benedict Farrowmere entered. Benedict was the king's cousin and closest adviser. He was a sleek, silver-haired wolf with eyes like polished flint. He moved with a liquid grace that made Lavinia's skin crawl. Unlike Edwin, whose power was a blunt hammer, Benedict's was a scalpel. "So," Benedict purred, leaning against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "The miracle worker." Lavinia didn't stop wiping the baby's face. "Lord Benedict, you've caused quite a stir, Lavinia. Cordelia is demanding you be burned for witchcraft. She claims you've ensorcelled the prince." "I don't have magic, my lord. Everyone knows that," Lavinia said calmly. She lifted Silas, holding him against her shoulder. The baby grasped a lock of her brown hair and tugged. "Precisely." Benedict walked closer, inspecting her. "That is what makes this so interesting. The king is convinced you are the only cure. He has ordered a suite prepared for you, adjacent to the nursery." Lavinia froze. "A suite? But I am a servant. Not any more. You are a ward of the crown now." Benedict's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me, Lavinia, what is your game?" "I don't have a game. I just want the baby to stop crying." A noble sentiment. But dangerous. Benedict reached out to touch Silas's foot. The baby instantly recoiled, letting out a sharp cry. Benedict withdrew his hand, his expression darkening. "He rejects us all. The blood of the Alpha is too strong in him. It rejects the pack, but it accepts nothing." "He accepts peace," Lavinia said defensively, stepping back. "Be careful, little Wolfless," Benedict whispered. "The king is grateful today, but gratitude turns to suspicion very quickly in this court. If the boy dies while in your care, there will be no trial. Edwin will tear you apart with his bare hands." "Is that a warning or a threat?" "It's a forecast." Benedict straightened his coat. "Oh, and Lady Penelope sends her regards. She suggested you might need help bathing the child later. I would advise you to decline. The water tends to be scalding when Penelope helps." He turned and left, leaving a scent of cold rain and malice behind him. Lavinia slumped against the changing table, clutching Silas. She was trapped. She had traded the drudgery of the scullery for the snake pit of the court. Later that afternoon, Edwin returned. He looked different. He had bathed, shaved the rough stubble from his jaw, and changed into a tunic that wasn't stained with sweat. He looked like a king again, handsome, imposing, and terrifying. He entered the nursery carrying a tray of food himself. "The servants are afraid to come in," Edwin grunted, setting the tray on a table. "They think you're a witch who stole the baby's voice." "I heard," Lavinia said, eyeing the roast chicken. Her stomach growled loudly. Edwin chuckled. It was a rusty sound, unused. "Eat, you're too thin. A bony chest is no place for a prince to rest." Lavinia sat and ate, trying to maintain some dignity while devouring the food. Edwin watched her, not with the predatory gaze of before, but with a strange, analytical intensity. "Why didn't you leave?" Edwin asked suddenly. Lavinia paused, a chicken leg halfway to her mouth. "Sire?" "Last year. The purge of the staff. We let go of 50 servants. You could have left. Gone to the human villages in the south. Why stay here, where you are treated like furniture?" Lavinia looked at the stone walls. "This is my home, sire. My parents worked in these kitchens. I was born in the servants' quarters. I may be wolfless, but I am of the north. I don't belong in the human villages either. I'm too strange for them, and too weak for you." "Not weak," Edwin murmured. He walked over to where Silas was sleeping in the crib. The baby was finally sleeping alone, though Lavinia had left her apron in the crib with him, so her scent, or lack thereof, would comfort him. "You stood up to me," Edwin said. "Beta guards twice your size pissed themselves yesterday. You looked me in the eye." "I was terrified," Lavinia admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you alive." Edwin turned to her. "But you need protection. Benedict thinks you're a spy. Cordelia thinks you're a witch. Penelope wants you dead because she thinks—" He trailed off. "She thinks I want your attention," Lavinia finished. She laughed, a short, dry sound. "I assure you, Your Majesty, I do not. I just want to survive." Edwin stepped closer. The air in the room grew heavier, charged with his proximity. He was overwhelmingly masculine, scent of pine, wood smoke, and power. "And if I want your attention?" Edwin asked, his voice dropping. Lavinia stopped breathing. "Sire, don't mock me. I am a solution to a problem. I am medicine. You don't court the medicine." "I am not courting you," Edwin said sharply, pulling back as if burned. "I am assessing your loyalty. You are the only thing keeping my heir alive. That makes you the most valuable asset in this kingdom, and the most vulnerable." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy iron key on a chain. He placed it on the table. "Lock the door from the inside tonight," Edwin commanded. "Do not open it for anyone but me. Not for the maids, not for the healers. If Silas cries, you soothe him. If he sleeps, you sleep." "And if you come to the door?" Lavinia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Edwin looked at her, his golden eyes burning with a mixture of possessiveness and confusion. "If I come," he said, "it will be because the silence is too loud for me, too." He turned and strode out. Lavinia stared at the heavy iron key. She picked it up. It was cold. She went to the door and turned the lock. The click echoed in the large room. She was locked in a cage with a dragon's treasure, and the dragons were circling outside, waiting for her to make a mistake. Lavinia walked to the window. Outside, the snow was falling on the obsidian peaks. She looked at her reflection in the glass. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. From the shadows of the crib, Silas let out a soft coo. Lavinia smiled, a sad, weary smile. "Just you and me, little one," she whispered, against the whole damn pack. But as she lay down on the edge of the bed, clutching the key, she couldn't get the image of the Alpha King's burning eyes out of her mind. He looked at her not as a void, but as something necessary. And in the hallway outside, hidden in the shadows of a tapestry, Marianella Everhart, the master of spies, watched the king leave the nursery. She pulled a small notebook from her cloak and scribbled a single line. "The king has found a weakness. We must determine if we break it or use it." Marianella smiled, blew out the candle in the sconce, and vanished into the dark. The nursery was a golden cage, and Lavinia was the canary who had forgotten how to fly. 3 days of silence had passed, a miracle to the castle, a breath held too long for Lavinia. "You look like a corpse dressed for a funeral," a voice cut through the quiet. Penelope Stormhill stood in the doorway, holding a steaming copper basin, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "I am here to help you wash the filth off our future king." Lavinia stepped between Penelope and the crib. "He is clean. I bathed him this morning." "With a rag and cold water," Penelope sneered, setting the basin down with a heavy clang. The copper sides were turning a dull, angry red. It smelled of wolfsbane and scalded metal. "Bring him. He needs heat to strengthen his bones." "No," Lavinia said. "It's boiling." Penelope's eyes flashed muddy amber. A wave of beta dominance rolled off her. Crushing pressure meant to force an omega to their knees. Lavinia grabbed the crib rail, sweating but standing. You exist to take orders, Penelope snarled, raising a hand to strike. Bring me the pup, or I will drag you to the kennels. The main door exploded inward. Edwin Primeworth stood in the ruin, stripped to the waist, his eyes black. Get away from him. Penelope scrambled back, knocking the basin over. The water hissed as it ate into the stone floor. Edwin stared at the sizzling puddle, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. You brought boiling water, he whispered. To a baby. Sire, it was herbal. She lies. Edwin moved in a blur, lifting Penelope by her throat. If I ever catch your scent in this hallway again, I will send you to hunt with the rogues. Get out. He dropped her, and she fled, sobbing. Edwin turned to Lavinia, his eyes fading back to Hazel. You broke the door, she said flatly, brushing wood chips from her hair. I can't lock it now. I felt his fear, Edwin said, looking at the acid burns on the floor. Why didn't you submit? A normal Omega would have been on the floor. I told you, Lavinia said, picking up a broom. I'm empty. There's nothing to push down. Edwin stopped her hand on the broom. You are not empty. You are full of quiet and defiance. He reached out, his thumb grazing her cheekbone. You're bleeding, she whispered, looking at a cut on his brow. She led him to the chair and began cleaning the wound. Why doesn't the boy cry with you? Edwin asked, watching her. Because I don't ask anything of him. You all see a king. I see a baby who misses his mother. Edwin flinched. He never knew her. He knows the empty space. And you drown him in your grief. Edwin closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against her stomach for a fleeting, taboo second. I don't know how to stop. You don't have to stop grieving. Just stop screaming it. Silas cooed, breaking the spell. Edwin stood abruptly, the mask of the king returning. The carpenter will fix the door. Thank you, Lavinia. He left, but the spot where his head had rested burned against her skin. The summons arrived on a silver platter. The council demands the presentation of the prince at the Blood Moon banquet. You aren't going, Lavinia told Edwin. 100 wolves howling. The noise will send him into a seizure. That is why you are coming, Edwin replied, buttoning his ceremonial armor. If he is with you, he is calm. If they see a calm air, the throne is safe. If not, Benedict will claim I am hiding a defective child. The great hall was a cavernous beast, smelling of roast boar and 300 predators. When Lavinia walked in beside the king, holding the prince, the silence was deafening. The scrubber, in royal blue, the whispers were sharp and judging. My lords, Edwin boomed from the dais, I present your future king, Silas Primeworth. Lord Blackwood, an elder alpha with a scarred face, stood up. He hides in the skirts of a human. Does the boy have a voice? A king must roar. Make him cry out. Lavinia stiffened. They wanted to provoke the scream. He is sleeping, Lord Blackwood, Lavinia said clearly. The hall gasped. A servant speaking to a high lord? I did not speak to the furniture, Blackwood growled. Lavinia stood, handing a hand on Edwin's arm to stop his rising fury. She looked down at the lord. He is not a performance. If you need a baby to scream to prove your strength, perhaps your pack is weaker than you think. Blackwood lunged, but Silas woke up. He didn't cry. He looked at the angry man and let out a bubbling laugh, reaching for Blackwood's shiny medal. The tension snapped. He has the Primeworth eyes, Blackwood muttered, sitting down. That was foolish, Edwin whispered to her as the feast resumed. And magnificent. Later, Marianella Everhart, the spy master, slipped out of the shadows to refill Lavinia's wine. Don't drink, she barely breathed. Cordelia was in the cellars. She wasn't looking for a vintage. Lavinia looked across the room. Cordelia was watching them, eyes fixed on Silas. Lavinia poured her wine out and nudged Edwin. He understood immediately. "We are leaving," Edwin announced, scooping Lavinia and Silas up and marching out before the toasts began. Back in the safety of the nursery, Edwin punched the wall. "Poison! She is the High Healer." "She thinks she's saving the pack from a weak alpha," Lavinia said quietly. "You are not a witch," Edwin said, grabbing her face. The adrenaline of the night crashed into something raw. He kissed her, a collision of fear and possession. Lavinia gasped, then pushed him back. "No." Edwin stared, pupils blown wide. "Why?" "You feel the connection. I am your servant. If we do this, I become just another whore in the court. I won't be that." "You are right," Edwin said hoarsely, respect warring with desire. "I apologize. But I will always stand next to you, Lavinia. Whether you want me to or not. The attack didn't come from poison. It came from the sky." 3 nights later, a supernatural storm descended. Lightning tore the sky open, not with weather, but with a summoning. Lavinia woke to Silas, screaming. She rushed to the crib, but a barrier of static electricity threw her back. Silas was levitating, back arched, eyes rolled back. "The wards are breached!" Edwin shouted, bursting in. "Rogues are using a summoning spell to drag the alpha power out of him." "Do something," Lavinia cried. "I can't. If I touch him with my power, the connection will tear him in half." Cordelia and Benedict rushed in. "We must bind him," Cordelia yelled, raising her staff. "If his power rips loose, the shockwave destroys the tower." "He's a baby, not a bomb," Lavinia screamed. "He is a bomb right now," Benedict snapped. "Let him go, King, or we all die." Lavinia looked at Silas, floating in pain, fought over by wolves who cared more about the castle than the child. Magic needs a conductor. She crawled under the arcs of lightning. "Lavinia, stop! It will kill you!" Edwin roared. She didn't listen. She grabbed the iron bars, screaming as electricity surged through her. She swung her leg over and pulled herself up to the floating infant. She wrapped her arms around him. "I am nothing," she projected. "I am empty." She became the lightning rod. The spell, searching for the massive energy of the alpha, hit the void of the Wolfless. It slipped. The connection snapped. The lightning vanished. Silas dropped onto the mattress, crying a normal, fussy cry. Lavinia lay beside him, grey and still, her hands burned raw. "Cordelia! Fix her!" Edwin roared, tearing down the ice wall. Her heart stopped. Cordelia panicked, hands glowing. "She took too much voltage!" Edwin dropped to his knees, gripping Lavinia's limp hand. "Don't you dare leave! You promised to scrub the floors." Tears tracked through the soot on his face. "Sire," Benedict whispered. "Look." Silas had stopped crying. He placed a tiny hand on Lavinia's chest. A soft, golden light began to glow from his palm. "He's sharing," Cordelia gasped. "He's pouring his aura into her." The light pulsed. Lavinia gasped, her back arching as air rushed into her lungs. She coughed, eyes flying open to find Edwin weeping over her. "Did I stop the crying?" she rasped. "Yes," Edwin sobbed, burying his face in her neck. But across the room, Benedict watched the golden light fade. He saw the way the Wolfless's eyes held a faint, fleeting shimmer of gold before returning to brown. Lavinia Brightfall was no longer Wolfless. She had grounded the air's magic and absorbed it. She was something new, and the world was going to try to kill her for it. The first thing Lavinia noticed when she woke was the smell. For 24 years, her world had been olfactory silence. She could smell onions frying, damp stone and pine needles, but she had never smelled the world the way wolves did. She had never smelled emotion. Now the air was screaming. She smelled acrid fear. She smelled cold, calculating steel, Benedict. And overwhelmingly, permeating every inch of the silk sheets she lay in, she smelled a forest fire mixed with rain, a scent so rich and heavy it made her mouth water. Edwin. She is awake. Cordelia's voice was tight, vibrating with that acrid scent. Lavinia opened her eyes. She wasn't in the nursery anymore. She was in the king's chambers. The massive bed was surrounded by furs, and the fire in the hearth was roaring. Edwin was sitting in a chair by the bedside, his elbows on his knees, his face buried in his hands. He looked wrecked. At the sound of Cordelia's voice, his head snapped up. His eyes met Lavinia's, and for a moment they both froze. Edwin didn't just see her. He felt her. Before she had been a void, a blank spot on his radar. Now she was a beacon. She pulsed with a soft, golden rhythm that harmonized perfectly with his own alpha frequency. "You smell?" Edwin started, then stopped, his nostrils flaring. "Like him," Benedict finished from the shadows. The king's cousin stepped forward, his face unreadable. "She smells like the prince." Lavinia sat up, clutching the furs to her chest. Her hands were bandaged, but the pain was distant, dull. "Where is Silas?" "He is sleeping," Edwin said, his voice rough. "In the cradle beside you. He wouldn't settle anywhere else." Lavinia looked down. A small wooden cradle had been moved into the king's room. Silas was fast asleep, one hand gripping the edge of the blanket. "What happened?" Lavinia whispered. "I remember the lightning. The pain. You absorbed the backlash of a royal summoning," Cordelia said, stepping forward with a diagnostic crystal. She looked at Lavinia with a mixture of professional curiosity and religious horror. "By all laws of magic, you should be ash. A human body cannot hold alpha essence. It burns them out from the inside." "But she isn't burning," Marianella Everhart spoke up from the doorway. The spymaster was peeling an apple with a dagger, looking amused. "She's glowing." It was true. In the dim light of the room, Lavinia's skin had a faint, pearlescent sheen, and her eyes, once a flat, muddy brown, now had flecks of gold swimming in the irises. "The boy shared his spark," Edwin said quietly. "He gave her enough power to restart her heart. And now she is a hybrid," Benedict said coldly. "She is not wolf. She is not human. She is a vessel carrying the stolen power of the Primeworth line." "Shared," Edwin snarled, turning on his cousin. "Not stolen." "The council won't see it that way, sire," Benedict countered, not backing down. "They will see a scrubber girl who bewitched the air and leached his power. They are already gathering in the courtyard. They demand she be handed over for examination." "Examination?" Lavinia asked, the scent of steel from Benedict spiking into something sharper. "Malice." "Vivisection," Marianella clarified, taking a bite of the apple. Edwin stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the stone. "She is under my protection." "Your protection extends to your pack," Benedict said. "She is not pack. She is an anomaly, a mutation. If you protect her, you defy the council laws regarding magical corruption. You risk the crown, Edwin." Edwin walked over to the bed. He didn't look at Benedict. He looked at Lavinia. He reached out and touched the bandage on her hand. The contact sent a jolt through both of them. Not a static shock, but a hum of connection. It was the feeling of two musical notes resonating in perfect harmony. "She is not a mutation," Edwin said, his voice low and final. "She is my mate." The silence that followed was absolute. Cordelia dropped her crystal. It shattered. Benedict's face went slack. "You cannot be serious. You haven't marked her. She is a Wolfless." "She carries my son's spirit," Edwin said, his eyes burning gold. "She saved the air when the pack failed. And she smells—" He leaned down, inhaling the scent of her hair, ozone, milk, and the unique, indescribable scent of Lavinia herself. "She smells like home." Lavinia stared at him, her heart hammering. "Edwin," she whispered, "you don't have to lie to save me. "I have never lied to you, Lavinia," he said softly. "I was just too deaf to hear what my wolf was screaming until you nearly died." He turned to the room. "Get out, all of you. Tell the council that if they want her, they can come through me." Benedict stared at them for a long moment. The malice in his scent didn't fade. It curdled into something rotten. "As you wish, Alpha," Benedict sneered. He turned and swept out of the room, Cordelia trailing behind him, looking terrified. Marianella stayed for a moment. She tossed the apple core into the fire. "He's going to make a move, Edwin," she warned. "Tonight." "I know," Edwin said. "Do you have a plan?" Edwin looked at Lavinia, then at Silas. "Yes. Surviving." The attack didn't wait for nightfall. It came with the sunset. Lavinia was dressed in trousers and a tunic. Edwin insisted she be ready to move when the warning bells began to toll. Not the invasion bells, the treason bells. "They're coming up the stairs," Edwin said, buckling his sword belt. He checked the window. "The courtyard is full of Benedict's personal guard. He's convinced the council I'm compromised, mentally unfit." "Because of me," Lavinia said, picking up Silas. The baby was awake, wide-eyed, sensing the tension. "Because he wants the crown," Edwin corrected. "You are just the excuse." The doors to the royal chambers shook as a battering ram hit them. "Boom! We can't hold the room," Edwin said. "There's a passage behind the tapestry. It leads to the catacombs. Marianella is waiting there with horses." "We're running," Lavinia asked. "You're the king." "I'm a father first." Edwin grabbed her hand. "Come." They ran to the heavy tapestry depicting the first hunt and pushed it aside. A narrow stone door stood open, but before they could step through, a shadow detached itself from the darkness of the passage. It wasn't Marianella. It was Cordelia, and she was holding a crossbow. "I'm sorry, sire," the healer wept, her hands shaking. "Benedict said, he said the corruption would spread, that she would turn the prince into a monster." "Cordelia, put it down," Edwin said, stepping in front of Lavinia. "I can't," Cordelia sobbed. "He has my sister. He said if I don't stop the witch, he'll kill her." "I am not a witch, Cordelia," Lavinia said, stepping out from behind Edwin. "Look at me." "Don't look at her eyes." Cordelia squeezed them shut. "He said you have the evil eye." "Cordelia." Lavinia's voice changed. It wasn't the submissive whisper of a servant. It carried the resonance of the power she had absorbed. It thrummed with command. "Look at the air." Cordelia's eyes flew open against her will. She looked at Silas in Lavinia's arms. The baby reached out to the healer and cooed. A tiny bubble of golden light floated from his hand, drifting across the room. It touched the tip of the crossbow bolt and popped. The tension in the string snapped. The bow broke in Cordelia's hands. Cordelia stared at the broken weapon. She fell to her knees, sobbing. He's pure. The magic isn't tainted." "Move, Cordelia," Edwin commanded. She scrambled aside. "Go! The tunnels! Benedict knows about the secret passage. He's waiting at the exit. You have to go up." "Up?" Edwin looked at the ceiling. "To the rookery. The wyverns," Cordelia whispered. "The ancient riding beasts. They haven't been ridden in a century, but it's the only way." The doors behind them splintered. Wood flew. Men shouted. "Up," Edwin decided. They sprinted, not down into the dark, but up the winding stairs to the highest tower. The wind howled as they climbed, the stone slick with ice. Lavinia's lungs burned, the extra weight of the baby heavy in her arms, but the golden energy in her veins surged, giving her stamina she shouldn't have possessed. They burst onto the rookery landing. It was an open platform, wind-whipped and desolate, and there, waiting for them, was not a wyvern. It was Benedict. He stood near the edge, surrounded by 5 of his elite guards. He wasn't holding a sword. He was holding a jagged black crystal, a siphon stone, "I told you I knew the passages, cousin," Benedict shouted over the wind. "I knew you'd run. You always were sentimental." "Benedict!" Edwin drew his sword, the steel singing. "End this. Let them go. This is between us. It ends when the abomination is dead and the heir is in my custody." Benedict raised the stone. "That girl is a battery, Edwin, and I'm going to drain her dry." He thrust the stone forward. A beam of necrotic black energy shot out, aimed straight at Lavinia. Edwin lunged to intercept it, but the guards were on him instantly, tackling the Alpha King. He roared, throwing them off like rag dolls, but he was overwhelmed. The black beam hit Lavinia. She screamed. It felt like the lightning in reverse, cold, sucking, tearing. She fell to her knees, clutching Silas. The golden light in her eyes flickered, dimming. "Yes," Benedict laughed, walking closer. "Give it back! Give back the power you stole, you filth!" Lavinia felt her strength fading. She felt the cold seizing her heart. Silas began to wail, a terrified, piercing cry. The sound cut through the pain. It was the sound that had started everything. The sound of a baby, alone in the dark. Lavinia looked down at him. "I am not empty anymore," she thought. "I am his mother." She didn't fight the drain. She reversed the polarity. Just as she had grounded the lightning, she reached into the connection she shared with Silas. But she didn't take from him. She amplified him. "Silas," she whispered, "sing." She opened her mouth and let out a sound that wasn't a hum. It wasn't a scream. It was a howl. But she had no wolf. So the howl didn't come from a beast. It came from her soul, amplified by the Alpha Heir's limitless potential. It was a sonic boom of pure golden rejection. The black beam shattered. The siphon stone in Benedict's hand exploded into dust. Benedict was thrown backward by the shockwave, sliding toward the edge of the tower. His guards were knocked flat. Lavinia stood up. She was glowing, not faintly, but brightly, like a morning star. Her hair floated around her face in a halo of energy. Edwin, having thrown the last guard off the precipice, stared at her. "What are you?" Benedict gasped, clinging to the stonework at the edge of the drop. Lavinia walked toward him. She didn't look like a scrubber. She looked like a queen. "I am the quiet," she said, her voice echoing with power, "and you are too loud." She didn't touch him. She just let the baby wave his hand. A gust of wind, gentle but firm, caught Benedict. He lost his grip. He didn't scream as he fell. He just vanished into the mist below. Edwin walked to Lavinia's side. He looked at the empty space where his cousin had been. Then at the woman holding his son. "I think," Edwin breathed, sheathing his sword, "that we don't need the wyverns." The sun rose over a changed kingdom. Benedict's coup had died with him. The sight of the golden lady on the tower, glowing with the Alpha Heir's light, had been seen by the army below. The soldiers had dropped their weapons. They knew a divine sign when they saw one. But the council was not so easily swayed by miracles. They were bureaucrats of tradition, and tradition stated that a king must have a wolf mate. The throne room was packed. The air was stale with the scent of old laws and nervous sweat. Lavinia stood in the center of the room, wearing a gown of white velvet that Marianella had found. She held Silas. Edwin sat on the throne, his hand bandaged, his expression made of granite. Lord Blackwood stepped forward. He looked tired. "The law is clear, Majesty," Blackwood said, tapping a heavy tome. "The Queen must be of the blood. She must be able to shift. This woman, despite her heroics, is a genetic dead end. If you marry her, your line becomes diluted. The pack weakens." "Weakens?" Edwin stood up. He walked down the steps of the dais. He stopped in front of Blackwood. "My cousin, a pure-blood alpha, tried to murder an infant. My healer, a pure-blood wolf, acted out of fear, and this genetic dead end ground a lightning bolt and defeated a traitor without drawing a blade. He turned to the room. You speak of the wolf as if it is the only source of strength. You speak of the pack as if it is just claws and teeth. Edwin took Lavinia's hand. He raised it. Look at her. She has no wolf. She has no beast. And because of that, she has no cruelty. She has no drive to dominate. She has only the drive to nurture, to protect. He looked at Lavinia, his eyes softening. For 300 years, the Primeworth kings have married alpha females. And for 300 years, we have had war. We have had screaming heirs and bloody successions. Edwin took the crown from his own head. The heavy obsidian circlet looked dull compared to the light in Lavinia's eyes. I am an alpha, Edwin said. I have enough wolf for both of us. What my son needs, what I need, is not more fire. He placed the crown on the cushion held by a page. If the council will not accept her as queen, then the council can find a new king. I choose the quiet. Gasps rippled through the room. Abdication? It was unheard of. Lavinia squeezed his hand. Edwin, she whispered. The people. The people are safe, he said. Marianella can run the kingdom. She's been doing it anyway. Lord Blackwood looked at the king, then at the Wolfless woman. He looked at the baby, who was pulling on Lavinia's ear, babbling happily. Blackwood sighed. It was a long, rattling sound. If you abdicate, Blackwood grumbled, who will lead the hunt? Who will sign the treaties? I will, Edwin said. And who will stop the heir from crying? Blackwood asked. She will, Edwin said. Blackwood looked at the other council members. They shifted uncomfortably. They knew they couldn't hold the throne against a king who was willing to walk away from it, and they were secretly terrified of the glowing woman. There is a precedent, Blackwood lied, closing the book, an obscure amendment. From the, Second Age. Is there? Edwin raised an eyebrow. Yes. Blackwood cleared his throat. It states that if a Wolfless demonstrates the ability to, throw a traitor off a tower using wind magic, she is considered an honorary wolf, for administrative purposes. A ripple of relieved laughter went through the court. It was a face-saving lie. But it was enough. Blackwood bowed. Low. Long live Queen Lavinia. The room hesitated for a second, and then, like a dam breaking, the courtiers bowed. Long live the Queen! Edwin didn't look at them. He pulled Lavinia into his arms. He kissed her, and this time he didn't care about the audience. He didn't care about the scent of judgment. He only cared about the scent of ozone, milk, and peace. They say the North changed after that. Obsidian Hall, once a fortress of screams and shadows, became a place of light. The nursery windows were always open. Edwin remained the Alpha King, fierce and just. But he was no longer a king of solitude. He ruled with a partner who softened his edges, a queen who walked the halls without a sound, but whose presence filled every room. Silas grew up strong. He had his father's eyes and his mother's calm. He was the first alpha in history who didn't use his voice to crush, but to sing. And Lavinia? She never got a wolf. She never shifted under the full moon. But she was never wolfless again. She was the balance. She was the anchor. Years later, when the winter snows were deep, she would sit by the fire with Edwin, listening to the wind howl outside. Do you miss the silence? Edwin asked her once, grey touching his temples. Lavinia looked at their chaotic, loud, happy family. Silas teaching his younger sister how to throw a snowball in the rug, the dogs barking, the fire crackling. She smiled, leaning her head on the Alpha King's shoulder. No, she whispered. I like our song. Fate had tried to break them with a curse. The world had tried to break them with rules. But in the end, love was the only magic that couldn't be grounded. If you enjoyed this story of the Wolfless Queen and her Alpha King, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of romance, magic, and destiny.